Greetings, this is Frina Rilamentra, the half-elven YouTuber. I come to you with a reaction. This time, we're reacting to Overly Sarcastic Productions and newest Trope Talk. Now, today's episode, today's trope, Deus Ex Machinas. Now, hopefully it's a little more lighter subject and stuff than last night's episode of Critical Role. If you haven't watched it, my reaction yet for it, please go do so. I'm about to give it. All I'll say is, toward the end we were really hoping for a Deus Ex Machina. We're not sure if we actually got if what happened counts or not. But yeah. I think I'm slightly traumatized. Well, with that out of the way, all to say is I do not own nor am I associated with the Overly Sarcastic Productions YouTube channel or any other online presence they may have. Just a fan sharing with my fellow fans, as always. So far, at least.
This video was sponsored by Campfire. I can't believe they swept out of nowhere and totally saved the day. One of the many key differences between fiction and reality is that the real world has a lot more stuff happening in it. An individual person's life experience might seem rather narrow and uneventful, but they're surrounded on all sides by the turbulent chaos of trillions of other factors. The lives of the people around them, the complex socio-political climate of the slice of the world they inhabit, the day-to-day weather and its many factors, the gravitational and electromagnetic consequences of cosmic events billions of years old. So, much like an object spinning through space, there's always a chance they'll smack into something unexpected. A random twist of fate caused by someone halfway around the world they'll never meet or even potentially know exists causes a ripple effect that dramatically impacts the course of their life. An omniscient observer would be able to trace the exact confluence of factors that led to this specific twist of fate happening, but to Joe Average, these events would seem arbitrary and surprising, a random intrusion into the otherwise predictable course of their life. They might credit it to karma or personal merit or the will of the universe, but ultimately, things just happen sometimes. This is such a fundamental concept to the way reality works that it's interesting how gauche it is to use it in fiction. Storytellers catch a lot of flack for coincidences, happenstances, or really anything that seems to come out of nowhere. No matter how realistic it is for unexpected things to happen, a lot of the art of storytelling is about guiding the audience through a linear journey with an internal logic that the audience can follow. Introducing important plot-altering factors with insufficient build-up can feel like it's breaking some fundamental principle of storytelling. This is why, for as long as it's existed, the trope of the Deus Ex Machina has been a smidge controversial. Deus Ex Machina, Latin for God from the Machine, is a concept that originated in ancient Greek theater. Tragedies would frequently be resolved by the sudden appearance of a literal god who would typically be lowered onto the stage by a mechane, a crane producing the illusion of flight. Euripides was a big fan of this trope, notably utilizing it in Medea when she escapes in Helios' golden chariot, in Helen when the Dioscuri appear out of nowhere to convince the king not to kill his sister for letting Helen escape, and in Alcestis when Heracles appears out of nowhere to save Alcestis from the underworld. Aristotle was one of this trope's earliest critics, stating that a story should be resolved by factors internal to the plot rather than external influences, which he saw as kind of a cop-out. Other critics of the trope expressed frustration that protagonists were miraculously saved from tragic endings, because sometimes we like a good tragedy, and sometimes the sad ending is thematically important, and sometimes it's just more realistic for things to not work out perfectly for everyone. But despite the criticism, the Deus Ex Machina was a crowd pleaser. A lot of audiences really liked seeing their heroes rewarded with happy endings, no matter how unlikely or contrived they seemed on paper. The current popular definition of a Deus Ex Machina is a plot device that resolves a seemingly unresolvable problem via an unexpected, improbable, or otherwise unpredictable event. A villain is killed by a meteor strike or sudden heart attack, a hero avoids falling to their death by suddenly sprouting wings, a character is rescued from imprisonment by way of spontaneous alien abduction, etc. Despite the iffy connotations of this trope, many classic stories have featured Deus Ex Machinas of various kinds. War of the Worlds is a pretty classic example, where the unstoppable Martian invasion is ended by the fact that the Martians are revealed to have no immune resistance to any of Earth's diseases, and the common cold spontaneously wipes them out. Lord of the Rings also features one that Tolkien was aware of and very wary of. Naturally, the famous giant eagles that turn up 3 times throughout The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings to rescue our protagonists from assorted high places. Tolkien was terrified of overusing the eagles because they had the potential to render almost every threat in the
4
story moot,
times.
so he tried to use them as sparingly as he could to avoid removing their mistakes. Now, while classic ancient Greek Deus Ex Machinas tended to come out of basically nowhere in the form of literal divine intervention, that specific flavor of Deus Ex Machina is much less common these days, and modern Deus Ex Machinas sometimes actually receive sprinklings of foreshadowing to try and integrate them into the story more cleanly. For some people, this is enough to classify them as not Deus Ex Machinas on the principle that a Deus Ex Machina has to fully come out of nowhere to count, but I don't think this is a particularly helpful delineation to try and draw. Deus Ex Machinas exist in a gray area with highly unclear boundaries. Some of them are completely separate from the events of the story thus far, while others make a certain amount of sense in hindsight. As long as they unexpectedly enter the story to specifically solve a problem, I think they count. But there is analytical value in subdividing Deus Ex Machinas according to how much foreshadowing they receive. At the low end, we've got negative foreshadowing. These are Deus Ex Machinas that don't just come out of nowhere, they actively contradict established rules of the story or setting. These have a lot of overlap with bad plot twists that prioritize shock value over actually making sense, but in this case they prioritize solving the plot over making sense within the plot. This can be frustrating for a lot of reasons, and often makes less sense on a second viewing with the benefit of hindsight, unless post Deus Ex Machina they do a really good job of explaining why the story was previously wrong about what is and isn't possible. Examples include a character displaying abilities previously established to be impossible for them, a person thought to be dead turning up to save the day with no explanation given for their survival, a supernatural force intruding on a previously completely grounded and realistic setting, stuff like that. These Deus Ex Machinas are almost always pretty bad unless they do a lot of heavy lifting to retroactively explain how the supposed rules they broke were never actually a problem. For instance, a lot of urban fantasy stories technically start with a Deus Ex Machina when a character who thinks they're living in a normal grounded setting is abruptly yanked into the secret world by way of supernatural which seems like it's breaking the rules of the setting, but it's really just establishing the real rules the story's going to be working on from now on. But if they happen late in the game, like a character developing a brand new problem-solving superpower out of nowhere right when they need it in the finale, it's pretty much always going to feel like a rule breaker. The Force is pretty bad about this, mostly because it's very loosely defined and every Star Wars property is written by different people who need the Force to do different things, so it's pretty much traditional for the Force to spontaneously develop new powers to solve whatever problem the heroes are facing. Down a hand and hanging over open space? Telepathy. Stranded in space away from the action? Astral projection. Someone's dead? Force resurrection. Oh boy, nobody tell Anakin about that one. A step up from this, we get no foreshadowing. This is what a lot of people consider the platonic ideal of a Deus Ex Machina, a day saver that comes out of nowhere with no overt plot points setting it up that still doesn't really disrupt the rules of the setting. We had no reason to think it would happen, but it does make sense that it could happen. Examples include a character displaying a new skill or ability they recently learned perfected off screen, a previously unintroduced character showing up to save the day, our hero pulling out a new weapon that hasn't been shown before, basically any scenario where something or someone previously unseen but still grounded in the established rules of the world appears to solve the problem. Almost all classical Greek Deus Ex Machinas fall into this category as they existed in a setting where gods and heroes regularly meddled with the lives of regular mortals, so random divine intervention was a precedented concept. These Deus Ex Machinas often make sense in hindsight even without any foreshadowing. The example in War of the Worlds demonstrates this, as the audience is given no reason to suspect the Martians would succumb to the common cold, but it does make sense that space aliens would be unprepared for Earth's infectious diseases, since that
it's an understandable one.
Vaccines and stuff. These Deus Ex Machinas couldn't necessarily be predicted, but do make sense in hindsight. Then you get cases of low foreshadowing, where concepts that play into the eventual Deus Ex Machina are subtly planted in the story before they pay off in a big Deus Ex Machina intervention. For instance, a character might briefly mention they've been working on a project off-screen that later turns out to be a badass new weapon, or they might name-drop an ally who later shows up to rescue them, or they establish some sort of connection to a supernatural force that later intervenes to save the day. This is where this trope begins to cross over with Chekhov's gun, where a seemingly innocuous detail is planted early in the story and pays off in the climax. However, these Deus Ex Machinas will still feature surprises for the audience. It's only lightly foreshadowed, so the audience probably can't guess exactly how it's going to play out. A couple decent examples of this can be found in the Season 1 finale of Last Airbender, where Princess Yue sacrifices herself to restore life to the Moon Spirit. While this is an unprecedented idea, Yue's connection to the Moon Spirit is established earlier in the same episode. She explains to the gang that she was healed by the Moon Spirit as a baby, resulting in her hair turning white. This plants the idea that she has a lasting connection with the life of the Moon Spirit, but it's still a bit of a surprise that in the finale she can give that life back. Similarly, in the same episode, Aang and the Ocean Spirit team up to waterbend a kaiju and wreck shop up on the Fire Nation, which is, again, new, but it's based on 2 established factors. Firstly, Aang, as the Avatar, is the bridge between the human and spirit worlds and can commune and connect with spirits in a way nobody else can. And secondly, in the Avatar state, Aang can do a whole bunch of stuff he can't normally do, including huge feats of waterbending. So despite being something we've never seen him do before, Aang briefly combining with the Ocean Spirit to absolutely tear up the Fire Nation fleet isn't so unprecedented that it feels like it comes out of absolutely nowhere. It's not as random as if, like, Sokka did it. And then there's some stories where the Deus Ex Machina has high foreshadowing. These are stories when the Deus Ex Machina isn't just hinted at early on in the story, it's straight up established. It might have even shown up and affected the story before its big problem-solving Deus Ex Machina debut. An established character turns up to rescue the heroes, a powerful supernatural force known to respond predictably to specific stimuli is motivated to aid the heroes, an established Chekhov's gun turns out to be very effective when fired. These are all cases where the Deus Ex Machina does come out of nowhere to solve the problem, but we already know the basics of what it'll look like when it does. And the question how this possibly counts as a Deus Ex Machina.
I was a little concerned when they What's was yet to watch. I don't know why I keep delaying, but then again, I already know about season 1. And while they change stuff, I already know that
the audience knows that something can happen and could thus theoretically anticipate its intervention, but just because something has been established to exist in story doesn't mean it can be relied on to show up when it's most convenient. An example of this sort of Deus Ex Machina is the giant eagles that save Sam and Frodo in Lord of the Rings. As mentioned, this is the 3rd time in the series they've rescued our heroes from high-altitude peril. They're a strongly established narrative presence that the audience knows and understands. The only reason it feels like it comes out of nowhere is that the eagles are established in story to be kind of fickle and unreliable, so the audience and characters aren't expecting them to swoop in out of nowhere and save the heroes no matter how many times it's already happened. And they're still regarded as a pretty massive Deus Ex Machina by both audiences and Tolkien alike. Now, it might be tempting to assume that Deus Ex Machinas are better received when they have higher levels of foreshadowing and feel more arbitrary and cheap when they have lower foreshadowing. But in my experience, that's not really the deciding factor for how much a Deus Ex Machina is going to annoy the audience. There are plenty of no foreshadowing Deus Ex Machinas that are very well liked for sheer coolness factor, and plenty of high foreshadowing Deus Ex Machinas that get some flack for being disappointing or anticlimactic. It's not a clean, single variable problem, but from what I've seen, there are a few key factors that determine how well a Deus Ex Machina goes over. The first distinction is between Deus Ex Machinas that help the heroes and Deus Ex Machinas that solve their problems for them. Helper Deus Ex Machinas might give the heroes an edge in combat that evens up a previously very unbalanced playing field, or they might kick in to help smooth over a happy ending after the heroes have already done the hard part of the big bombastic fight scene or the complicated heist mission or the climactic final showdown. Solver Deus Ex Machinas, in contrast, might one-shot the villain themselves or quickly and cleanly render the whole threat moot. Solver Deus Ex Machinas essentially replace a potential climactic final showdown with an external solution that nullifies the problem without ever involving the protagonists. This is liable to frustrate audiences much more than Helper Deus Ex Machinas, which typically just make it easier or even possible for our heroes to win without taking that victory away from them. There's a difference between a fairy godmother giving the hero a magical sword and a fairy godmother contracting the fairy corps of engineers to blast the evil emperor's doom castle with a whimsy-powered railgun. But on the flip side, sometimes if the heroes are in a fully impossible situation, the audience doesn't mind as much if a Deus Ex Machina fully bails them out rather than just giving them a little nudge. This is especially true if the heroes have already run themselves ragged trying to solve or escape the situation and the audience just wants to see them get a break already. If a narrative situation is already really unfairly skewed against our heroes, it seems less frustrating to an audience to see random or unprecedented acts of fate pitch in to help tip the scales the other way. And sometimes our heroes are faced with problems that are just really beyond what they can be reasonably expected to handle. A Deus Ex Machina might be needed to solve the impossible part of the problem, while the parts that are just really hard are left as an exercise for the protagonists. And finally, I've seen a lot of goodwill towards Deus Ex Machinas that were just fucking sweet. This is by far the most subjective judgment of the bunch, but if a Deus Ex Machina is just really damn cool, most people won't complain about it that much. The T-Rex randomly swooping in at the end of Jurassic Park to kill the raptors and let our heroes escape absolutely rules. No notes. The protagonists of Promare randomly getting a giant robot literally named the Deus Ex Machina just before the final showdown with the main villain and his giant robot? Hell yeah, zero complaints. This factor is, I think, less structurally discussed. For instance, both of those examples also fulfill one of the other factors, respectively, the heroes have already run themselves ragged and deserve a break, and the Deus Ex Machina just gives the heroes the tool to solve the problem rather than solving it for them, and it's also a lot harder to control for coolness as a factor when writing. Still, it is worth noting that Deus Ex Machinas can be fun enough to offset the potential dubiousness of how well this trope integrates into this story overall, because that's ultimately what the Deus Ex Machina struggles with. By its nature, this trope is disconnected from the story it takes place in. It intrudes on the expected progression of the story and bends it in a new direction, typically by saving characters from certain death or failure. And while it can be very satisfying to see protagonists facing seemingly impossible odds and finding a way to succeed anyway, I think there's actually a lot of merit to putting a character into a situation that's way over their head and then rescuing them later. It's like there's a habitable zone of storytelling. On one side, there's the space of zero conflict, where stories can't happen because they're too boring, and on the other side, there's the space of much too ridiculous threats, where stories can't happen because the protagonists have zero chance of surviving. But the Deus Ex Machina allows stories to edge into the danger zone of extreme threats. The heroes get to try their absolute hardest in the face of impossible odds, and then the intervention in the Deus Ex Machina actually gives them a chance of succeeding in the face of this ridiculously overwhelming threat. Normally, they'd just be doomed to failure. The Deus Ex Machina gives them a chance of success that'd otherwise be fully impossible, and until then, the audience gets to see how the characters navigate a situation they genuinely don't see a way out of. I think part of the reason I've never really minded this trope is because it's basically just the good version of how narrative antagonists work, and nobody complains about that. Bad stuff is allowed to hit the heroes out of nowhere with no warning all the time. Things are allowed and even expected to go catastrophically wrong with no warning. If the heroes ever describe their plan on screen, the plan is pretty much 100% guaranteed to fail at every possible turn to force the heroes into desperate improvisation. Beloved characters will be suddenly and tragically killed. Villains will inexplicably survive falls off of cliffs and into active volcanoes just so they can turn up and ruin our heroes' lives all over again. The universe of a fictional story is allowed to be an arbitrary and uncaring place only when it screws over the heroes to a frankly ludicrous degree. A Deus Ex Machina might be a narrative shortcut that lets the author easily bail the heroes out of an impossible situation, but it's no lazier than a Diabolus Ex Machina that randomly screws our heroes over for quick and easy conflict. Sometimes good things really do just happen, and sometimes that random easy twist of fate enables really cool stuff, like a T-Rex, or a giant robot fight, or our heroes surviving the dang movie. Especially after a long, complicated, and exhausting struggle to succeed, sometimes we just want to see our heroes get a goddamn break. So, yeah, and thanks again to Campfire for sponsoring this video. As you may know, Campfire is a browser-based tool suite designed to help writers and creators write and world build. With a whole host of modules at your disposal and a thriving community of fellow creators to bounce off of, Campfire is a fantastic platform to work on. And in an effort to increase accessibility, they've just launched a Campfire mobile app so you can access all of Campfire's greatest hits from the convenience of your phone. The app is available for Android and iOS and is 100% free with no ads and no limits on how many elements you can add, and all your work is saved on Google's secure cloud servers. Once you log in with your Campfire account, you can easily and seamlessly work on your projects from your phone or your computer. And if you want a fresh set of eyes on your work, you can also collab with other users. The Campfire app is slightly more limited than the full desktop version, but it's got all the core features a writer would want: characters, locations and maps, the manuscript word processor, timelines, the encyclopedia, and more. So if you do a lot of your best writing in scattered 3 a.m. notes on your phone, this could be for you. If you're interested in Campfire, check out the link in the description, and remember to use promo code OSP22 for 20% off a lifetime membership.
Well, thank you, Sarcastic, for that. Continue. What the frick? No!
This video was sponsored by Campfire.
God's... Good. I can't believe I did that. Episode... Cause, cause, um, today said, oh, oh, uh, well, yeah, just worrying about this, no, yeah, normally I think, you do generally hear that it's been more, uh, that the data set kind of been more associated with almost bad writing, but yeah, there are good examples. So, and it also, I never thought, but yeah, the exact opposite is allowed to happen a lot. So with no one, what, and it's just considered part of the story. And hang on, no, just let me check something real quick. Hey, sorry, play ads. Show me the actual list of. Sorry, I'll get with you in just a second. I don't. I have no idea if this is how it's spelled. Inter. What? Star Wars Rebels Season 3 finale. Okay. No. Tur- and mm, the oh, demo said a day dance further further establishing. Oh, good. No. Sing. mm, Power. Okay. Just wanted to get rid of the comment. Sorry if it took so long. I just want to
wants
pause
to see
that.
them get a break already. If a narrative situation is
Well, thank you for joining me. We're the. This is Frina Rina Metra, half of a YouTuber, and I wish thee good fortune on the quest of life.